the Tall Trees Trail this morning.
Well,
And
how was that?
it was nice.
Was it? How long did it take you?
Long time.
Did it? Like, well, how long?
Took like 4 hours.
Really?
Yeah. I took it slow.
And was it very challenging?
Challenging.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure. I have guests coming. I don't know if I could send them there. There's the Bootsy,
You have to-
rapids too. That's not as challenging. It is challenging in places. So here we are back in the main building. So, you know, it's really quiet and it's really picturesque and, you know, really how beautiful is that? I mean, it really is pretty. But, you know, it's like going to a marina and there's no boats around. You know, when there's no boats, you're thinking, what's happening here? Well, this kind of has that effect too, because without the boats, I mean, there's no fish, and without the fish, right? But people, I mean, this would have
Well, the
been-
fish are still here.
Fish, well, not as many, that's for darn sure. So they wouldn't have had like it wouldn't have been quiet here. This would have been very, 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 very noisy. And what would have happened is that the fish would have been sorted again, and now, you know, there would have been mechanization, and the first folks to have lost their jobs would have been the Chinese butchers. So now we have an iron butcher, and this machine was actually patented as the iron chink, because it replaced the Chinese butchers, as inappropriate as it is now today. This was in the late 20s. So they would have again butchered the fish head, tail, turned it on its back, up through this eviscerating machine, and they would have cleaned it, and then the guts would have been brushed out. So we do have a bit of a picture. We normally have it here, but we move things around for our Intertidal Festival, because it's a spot where people would have walked in. So you can imagine it would have been very smelly, very noisy, and this guy here would have had that dubious task fully closed with fish guts like all over. So there would have been like baskets and baskets and crates of fish that would have gone through this iron butcher. Now things moved on, and the noise alone, it would have been very, very noisy. So I'm told, because we have over 10,000 guests that come here a year, and, you know, often we'll have guests that come and visit the Cannery that have lived here, have worked here, they have first-hand experience about what it was like. And so when we do, we really take advantage of it to hear what they have to say, like, what did it feel like, what did it look. And what I'm told continually by folks who have lived here and worked here is that the noise was similar to if you had gone to like a very, very loud concert, and you know, you still feel it in your soul that night, even sometimes the next day if it was really good. This is how you would have felt in here. Your soul would have been vibrating. So much so that on some occasions they would cease work and they would go below to make sure that none of the pilings had been, because the building felt like it was actually swaying from the vibration from these machines. This one and the second one that we'll look at. So this iron butcher really revolutionized things, because we would have been able to produce, I think, a little under 3,400 on that manual line. And here we're going to be producing almost 34,000 cases of salmon per year. So things moved on quickly with this particular machine. So off the fish would go. Again, we would have head, tail, eviscerated the whole thing, but the fish still need to be slimed. So now we have running water that came to the cannery, and we would have used these types of bins right here, this sliming bin. So women would have been working here, and they would have had access to water and a tool, and they would have slimed the fish. Back on a little assembly line here, and it would have come along here. And both these machines here would have worked in tandem. We would have had several of these in place, and they all would have been put in order to can things at different dimensions and different sizes. So we would have the pound and the half pound, and so all the machines would have been calibrated for that. Not this particular one, because we're just butchering it.
Yeah.
The cutting one. This is where we'll do that. So over here, the fish would have been in this cart. A lever would have been lifted, and this machine here is called the Big Bertha. So the fish would have come tumbling down here, and they would have been cut here by this Big Bertha, and they also would have been stuffed. The product would have been stuffed. A month before the fishing season, you can imagine there was a lot of preparation that would have taken place. People would have come up from Vancouver now by steamship. You know, you have to imagine a pilgrimage of some sort. You know, it's not Noah's Ark exactly, but lots of things would have been put on that ship to prepare for the season. One of the things that would have been brought up here are the raw materials that would have been used for making the tins. Chinese workers would have come here ahead of time too with the crew, and they would have made the tins. Upstairs we have a canning loft. Now
So all these tins are made by hand?
Originally they were, yes. They would have been cut and made by hand. And over the years, however, mechanization, and we would have had machines, we would have had the raw material in pieces, and then we would have reformed them here and put the bottoms, etc. As we walk out, I can point out the canning loft upstairs, and you'll see these tins, once they were made, they would have come down here, they would have been gravity fed, but planning had to go into it, and they couldn't over-plan them, because if they planned for too many tins, they wouldn't be good for the following season, they would have rusted. So, you know, there was a lot of organizing here to prepare for the fishing season. So the tins would come here, they would go under here and get a sprinkle of salt. They would then go into here, and they would be literally, the contents, the salmon, would have been cut, but it would have been plunged inside of the tins. So once they were plunged inside the tins, they'd come along here, and now there's more quality assurance and quality control insofar as weight and volume per tin. So they would have gone all around this tool here to calibrate it, and then if it was too heavy or too light, it would have been rejected on this little assembly line, and they would have been hand weighed and repacked and what have you. This would have been moving at a speed of almost 102 per minute. So this would have been very, very fast for this type of technology too. If you notice when you came into the site, you know, the signage in the parking lot, at the base of that sign is one of these things right there. It's just sitting there on the base of it. So that is again, call it would have been used here. We would have had several of them in place. Down they
So this machine was used until 1972?
This would have been used until then. It would have been used until 68. We reopened for 1 year to assist with Prince Rupert's Cannery had had a fire, so we did. But our last tin actually down here would have been in the late 60s. So
Okay, so this is from Prince Rupert?
The tin itself?
Yeah, this one.
It might be. I mean, we may have different, what does it say, 1972. Fully sealed can. Yeah.
Wait, there.
There's no product in there. I have no
Okay,
idea what
there's
that
sand
is.
in there.
Yeah,
I was thinking how the salmon turned to sand.
Things have moved a few things around, but I really doubt any product is in any of them now. So off it would go here, a lid would be put on, and now we have this type of rubber material, because we have man-made material that would have been put on the lids. So now we're no longer using lead.
Yeah.
We would have, so the lids are on, we would have cleaned the tins, because they would have been a little sloppy in the process of filling, and then they would have been vacuum sealed. Now they still need to be cooked, so they would have come down here, and we would have had these trays that would have gone in these carts, and you would have had 100 tins per tray, and then they would have been loaded up, and your men would have been working here. On the assembly line, of course, things would have changed. We're talking about 92 years here, so there's wartime, you know, we have that to consider as well. Women would have been here, a lot of women would have been here, a lot of First Nations women would have been here. Many of them would have had roles on that assembly line. So they would have stacked them up in these carts, but men would have done that. They would have pulled these carts inside these retorts. So instead of having those silver ones, now we have these, and they would have cooked them same amount of time.
In water or just heat?
Steam again.
Steam, yeah.
Yeah, they'd go in there, and so they would put them aside for a full day again. All of these tools over here have to do with cooling stations and then labeling and what have you. So this is the equipment they would have used for that. But they would have to all cool for a full day. This is a door to one of these that was found and retrieved from underneath our dock when we were doing restoration work. So when the tide goes out, you know, some things are revealed still, and we do try to bring them up. But you can appreciate, you know, there's only a certain window of time to get this equipment up here, right? So it's labor intensive, and you got to like plan it out.
So why was the door under the dock in the end?
There's a lot of the places when it was all, we would have had more retorts than that, but a lot of the places when they were decommissioned, a lot of the equipment was just abandoned. And when it was abandoned, a lot of debris would have been in that water from a lot of these camps. So a lot of folks will come, especially people that are looking to get metal, or they're looking to get, you know, odds and ends or pieces. They will sometimes come along here, but you can't really dock your boat anywhere here unless you have a dock because of the tide, and because you just don't know how, well, people usually know how low it will go, but you know, you could be on a sandbar somewhere, and it could be rocky, so it's hard for you to dock anywhere. So, but some people do, and they will go up further up, and they will look along the shorelines to see what could be left. And I bet you a lot of things are left behind. So by the 50s, and you can see it from here, the canning loft. So all of that equipment up there would have been used to reform and make the cans. At one point, this cannery too would have supplied cans to other canneries. So over the years, we weren't using, we would have, when we just, butchered the fish and we cut the head, tail, and offal and we threw it all back to the water, we realized that there was rich oils from the heads and tails, and we could have done other things with it. So by mid-50s, they would have installed a reduction plant. And that reduction plant essentially permitted this cannery to be open year-round. Because before that, everything would have been shut down at the end of the fishing season. So you can appreciate this reduction plant, the separation of the oils and the meal. The oils would have been used as additives to various products like cosmetics and things of that nature, oil paints, but the meal would have been used for pet food or fertilizer. Now in the winter months, we would have done herring. In the summer months, we would have done the salmon. And we wouldn't, your fishing season is over.
We have a sockeye on his way.
Sockeye?
A sockeye in a box.
Oh, I'd like to have it. So so this would have been, the odors here would have been absolutely awful. Even Port Ed, when you drove through Port Ed, you would have been able to smell the reduction plant. So there's a spot on the site, we don't actually tour it, where there's a fish pit. So other places would have brought their meal here. They would have brought the heads and tails, and we would have processed it here. Because before this, we were fishing like everybody else, and we would have shut down in September. It would have been done with. So here we are on this side of the site, and this side of the site is where the Europeans would have lived. And by Europeans, I basically mean the management of the cannery. So we would have had, English folks and Finns. Some Finns would have been here too. We would have had Scottish folks, but mostly English, who would have been the managers of the cannery. So they would have come for the fishing season too, and they would have come possibly with their families. But technically, the majority of the people that would have lived here would have been First Nations, and the majority of the children would have been First Nations too. So we'd have the boss, the assistant manager, perhaps the net loft boss. Various people would have been in some of these locations. They would have had an office. They would have had over time again with the expansion of the cannery, but originally they would have had an office. They would have worked in these offices, and the folks that would have worked here would have been European men. So only men would have worked in the office. And all of the equipment, when we were, just seasonal, because we would have been seasonal right up to the 50s, so that's 50, 60 years of operating only seasonally, all of the equipment too would have been packed up and sent back to Vancouver. So, quite the pilgrimage when they would come down to do it. So they would have had, a woman would have come to this office only once they had a switchboard. We have little sound effects. It's very enlightening. So you'll notice, or perhaps you've noticed when we were walking through the cannery, there's different signs. Well, they represent flags, because each cannery would have had their flag. This flag right over here, the white and red, is the flag for North Pacific. Is our flag. Because you would want to identify those boats out there, right? You want to know who's who out there, and who's fish to get. So this is the company store. So like all remote areas, you would have a company store. Now, who would be coming to the company store?
The workers.
I beg your pardon?
The workers.
Yeah, but not all of the workers, not all of them would have come here. This would have been for like luxuries or necessities. Because folks that would have had their food, etc., the Chinese, the First Nations, and the Japanese would have been responsible for their own food, their own cooking, and their own supplies. The Europeans would have had, their wages would have been evaluated with a bunkhouse stay and also access to a mess hall. They took all of their meals here, but this would have been used for again, necessities, and would have changed a fair amount over the years too, because in the beginning you were very, very beholden to the store keep, because there would have been no prices on anything here at all, and you would have come in, you would have asked for an item, and that item would have been the value of it, and they wouldn't know how much it was, the person buying it. They would put that against your name for your income. So at the end of the year, your wages would be given, but what you owe to the store would be given. And this is why, if you're not familiar with the song that's coming up, I owe my soul to the company store, many of them were forced to come back the following year. So there were abuses. It's not uncommon. Mining towns have company stores too, so it's owned by the company too, right? So, they did circumvent this, and they did try to get a handle on these types of abuses, and they introduced a coupon system, because no currency would have been exchanged here. People wouldn't have money here. They wouldn't exchange currency. Your wages were paid at the end. So they would have instituted coupons instead of in prices. It's been represented here. I mean, we had the inventory here to begin with, but it's been represented in around late 40s, based on pictures that we would have had of this company store. Of course, we have all of this stuff. We had all of it. Never, I mean, it's out there for display, but never any salmon. That never would have been put here. And no alcohol. This was a dry zone, so there would have been no alcohol. If you are going to stay at the Cannery and have visit other, look at and read some of the signs, back in the office on the counter is a contract, a Chinese contract. And they would have been similar contracts, but they would have been very specific. One of the conditions also in the contract is, of course, no alcohol. So that would be terms of immediate dismissal. So they were pretty strict about that too. And I'm not saying that there wouldn't have been some alcohol here and there. I'm sure the manager might have had, and they would have had some medicinal purposes too. But mostly Europeans would have used this store, and they would have used it for purposes of having their laundry. A launderer would have been here, a presser pressing their clothes, a butcher would have been here, a post office would have come here too. So they would have come back and forth, but mostly Europeans would have used this store. We've come across we have like 10,000 guests per year. And one of the guests that was on my tour one day, he has the actual order book from this store. And so he said that the biggest product that would have been purchased, as a wholesale, the store, would have been tobacco. So either smoking tobacco, or chewing tobacco. So loose tobacco or chewing tobacco. That was one of the biggest items that would have been bought from this store. That's one of the biggest items that the store would have bought to stock at the store, I should say. So again, wartime too, we're talking about. So that would have changed the workforce on site. And also